Welcome back to our Pong game tutorials. What we're going to be working on in this tutorial is making sure that our game over screen works a little better, that we'll change backgrounds in our game over screen. We will have a look at defining whether or not the player has reached a high score. And with that, we're going to make another sprite that will denote whether or not there's a high score or not. In our next video after this one, I'll show everybody how to insert sounds into their game. So the first bit that we're going to be working on is just changing a little bit more with our game over, so that when the game is over, that it'll change the background for us. Because right now, when we play our little game, we got a ball that moves, it hits a paddle, it hits the top, it bounces off the sides. When we miss, we get a game over that comes up and our ball disappears. So what we would like to do is also when a game over happens, we're going to switch backdrops. So we're going to come to the bottom right side of the screen and we're going to select a second backdrop. So pick something a little bit different. I'm going to see if I can find just basic stars like that there. That's going to be a second backdrop. So if I come to costumes here, actually not costumes here, I should have two backdrops now. Is it going to let me see all my different backdrops? There we go. If I click on the backdrop and I go to backdrops, I should have multiple backdrops. I got backdrop 1, which is empty, wall, and stars. So I'm actually going to click on this backdrop 1. And if I right click on it, it's going to let me delete it right there. So I only have two backdrops, wall and stars. Now, whichever one I have clicked on is the one which is going to be the default backdrop. So if I have wall clicked, that'll be the one that plays. If I have stars clicked, that'll be the one that plays. So even when I hit the flag here, whichever one was active is going to be the backdrop which shows up. And we want to be able to control which backdrop shows up. When I play this game, I want my wall to show up when the game plays, and I only want my stars to show up when the game is over. So to do that, we're going to come back to the ball, and we're going to go back to the code window. So we got the ball in the code window. And what we're going to do to make sure that it always plays with the ball, the brick wall background, is under looks, you will see that there is a switch backdrop to. So whenever the game starts, we're going to show the ball, we're going to switch the backdrop to, and my wall 1 backdrop, which is my brick wall backdrop. So when I play the game now, I get my brick wall backdrop. Now, when the game is over, I want to change the backdrop to something else, and we want it to be able to do it really, really quickly. So we're going to do that on the ball as well. So all we're going to do is move down towards the bottom of this code. You may be able to see all the code on your screen. And we've got a number of things going on here. If touching bottom edge, we're going to repeat 10 times pixelate. We're going to hide. We're going to do those kinds of things. And what I am going to do is, just as the ball is being hidden, we're going to switch the backdrop to stars backdrop, and then it will also broadcast the game over. So the way it's going to look now is this. I can play. It's got my 1 background. If I miss, boom, game over. I get a different background. My game over sprite shows up. And when I play the ball again, here we are, we get my brick wall again. So that's how we quickly change backgrounds from one to another during gameplay. We're going to add a little bit more to this in a little bit once we start working on a high score. Now, next bit is going to be the high score and determining on whether or not we have a high score. And determining on whether or not we have a high score is going to require a couple of different things from us. It's going to require a variable. It's going to require a little math for the variable, which is going to be fairly straightforward, which I'll explain to you. And then it's going to require some changing down here for our game overs, because we're going to have 2 different game over sprites. We're going to have a game over that congratulates you for having the high score, and just a game over screen for just plain game ending, but you not getting the high score. So the first thing we need to do is build ourselves a high score variable so we can keep track of high scores. So we're going to go to control. Sorry, not control. We're going to go to variables. My apologies. We're going to make a new variable. And this variable, we're just going to call high score. Fairly straightforward. So now we have a high score variable. It's going to sit over here for now. Now the high score variable, we do not want to set to 0 right every time we play the game, because if so, the high score would reset itself every time it plays. The fact that the high score variable exists, the very first time you play the game, it'll be 0. We want it to be able to store the value for that, so we're not going to reset it here at the beginning. And we're going to treat the high score a little bit to work on its own. So we're going to add some code. We're going to add a separate when clicked code off to the side of your main code block. So we're going to go to events and we're going to go when clicked. So this is where we are going to set the value of our high score. So once we're in here, we're going to go into control. We're going to bring in a forever loop, something that we're going to use quite often in the different games that we build. And then we're also going to bring in an if loop, or an if-then decision structure, sorry. And now we need to do a little bit of math. How are we going to know we have our high score? Well, we know the high score starts at 0 the very first game. And say you got 10 points. How are you going to determine that the high score changes if a player gets more than 10 points? And it's a simple mathematical formula. So we're going to come to operators, and we are going to grab a greater than sign, which is this one here. Don't worry that it says 50 in here. We're going to be changing that. Now, the next thing we're going to grab to put in here is we're going to come to the variables. We're going to bring score, and we're going to drop it right there. And they're going to grab the variable high score, and we're going to drop it right in there. So this says forever if a score is greater than the high score. So say the score was at 10. The last person who played got 10 points. So if the score is greater than high score, so if the new person playing gets 11, right, that will be greater than high score. So what are we going to do then? Well, we are going to then set the high score to the new score. So if the high score was 10 and you're playing along and you have 15, your score is greater than high score. So the high score will be set to what your score is, which is 15. So it's a quick mathematical formula here in a quick logic statement to basically saying the high score will only be changed if the score is greater than the high score. So the first time the game plays, the high score is 0. So we'll just play this. Now, we haven't actually, if we set it out, yeah, this should work. So if I play this here, there we go. 1, 2, because the score is greater than the high score right now. I'm just going to get this to 5, so now I can die. All right, so the game played. High score and score are equal, and that makes sense that high score and score are the same because it was the first time the game played. Now watch what happens. When I play the game, high score should stay at 5, and score should go to 0. And now when I play, see how the high score doesn't change? Because the score is not greater than high score. If I die, the high score stayed at 5. If I play again, and this time get higher than 5 hits or higher than 5 points, that high score should start changing. There we go, because now the score, every time it goes, is greater than high score. Okay, that works. That's good. Now, another thing is we don't actually necessarily need to see the high score every time. You only really need to see the high score if you get the high score. You can leave it on if you want. I'm going to show you a way where I'm going to turn it off and only bring it on when the high score is actually gotten, or show it at the end of the game. But what we're going to also end up having is 2 different game over screens. We're going to have a game over screen, which is just a plain game over, and we'll have a game over screen that congratulates a person for having a high score. So to make my new sprite, which is going to congratulate people for getting a high score, I'm going to make a new sprite, but instead of making it just from new, I'm going to right click on my game over sprite down here, and I'm going to duplicate it. And instead of leaving it called Game Over 2, I'm going to call it High Score. And hit Enter. Now when I go to the costumes for this, it looks exactly the same as my other one. The only thing that I'm going to do is add a new line of text that says, congratulations high score, exclamation point. And then I'll just hit enter on that. Oops. I'll just click off of that. How come it's not letting me click off? There we go. And then I can take this and center it nicely in the middle. And now I have a high score sprite. Now it's not going to show on screen right away because we already have some code in there. Whenever you duplicate a sprite, it brings the code along with it. So if I just click on the show here, we'll see that it shows up. It's off to the side, and there's two ways you can make sure that's in the center each time you run it. You can either center it here on the X and Y's, or you can go to a motion and you can automatically set it to go to 0, 0. Actually, we can set it to go to 0, 0 each time it shows up. Yeah, let's do that. And if I just click on this code, it'll show up and it'll go to 0. Congratulations, high score. All right, so that's a different sprite. Now, that sprite right now is showing up when it receives game over. Well, we don't want it to show up just when game over is received, because if that happens, game's over, you don't have the high score, and you just get the high score to show up. We don't want that. So we're going to have it listen for a new message. We haven't made the new message yet, but we'll have it listen for a new message, and we'll have it listen for the high score message. So right now, when we lose the game, if we do not have the high score, we just get game over, and the high score doesn't show up. And actually right now, the way we have it coded, the high score will never show up because we haven't broadcast a high score message yet. So to broadcast that high score message, we're going to come back to the ball, and we're going to make a number of changes back down here at the bottom in this if bottom edge. We're going to make a number of changes. So we're going to leave a couple of things here. We're going to take some parts out. We're basically going to take this switch backdrop to stars out. We're going to take the game over out, and we are going to tuck the stop all right back in under the hide. So we're going to leave these out for now. We're going to need to bring in a new control structure, one that we haven't used yet. We're going to bring in an if then else, and an if then else allows us to make multiple decisions in here. You'll see how it works. We're just going to come and plug it right in below the hide. Now that stop all is not in a good place. That stop all on my screen needs to be pulled out, and that stop all needs to go right here below the if then else. If it's not below this if and else, it's going to stop your game prematurely and nothing is going to run. So please be very careful in making sure that it is in the right spot. Now we're going to throw a logic statement in here, and we're going to go back to our mathematical operators, and we're going to bring in an equal sign, and we're going to throw an equals right into there. So what we're going to check out is we're going to know we have the high score now if, let's go to our variables, if our score equals our high score. So if the two of them are changing at the same time, and when the game over, the high score matches the score, we know we have a high score. And we're now going to go to looks. We're going to switch the backdrop to stars, the same as before. We are going to bring in a broadcast. But instead of broadcasting game over, we're going to have it broadcast high score. Oops, that's not what I wanted. And I got that right back where I needed it. I'm working with a little less room than some of you are. And so that will work nicely there. And then we'll take this bottom part and throw it right into the else. So switch backdrop to stars, broadcast game over. So if score equals high score, broadcast high score, else just broadcast game over. And that will give us our different sprites. So if we play this now, and now I lose, I just get that. Now, I would have to play all the way to 13 if I wanted to. in order to check to see if my high score is going to work, but I'm going to cheat. And as a developer, you get to cheat on these kinds of things. So I'm just going to go to variables. I'm going to bring a set high score to 0 in, but I'm not going to attach it to anything. So if it's not attached into any of the when clicked flag events, it will not affect the game when the game plays. But if I bring it into here and just click it, it sets the high score down to 0 because I've got it set here at a set high score to 0. So as a developer, you can cheat a little bit and reset your high scores. So now the high score equals the score. If I lose, I get my congratulations, high score. And if I play and I lose and don't get the high score, I don't get the high score. So I'll pause right here. I'll let you get that code in place. And then we'll come in and actually I think I'll stop the whole video right here because the last thing we're going to do is we're going to learn how to put in sounds. And that'll be in our next little video.